Many of the planning, preparation, and nailing techniques we've shown you also apply to our next step-by-step review of soffit installations. There are a number of different soffit application situations you may encounter, such as enclosed eaves on remodeling projects and open rafters on new construction projects. We'll also show you how to miter hip roof corners, create a boxed return, and add support for wide overhangs. For open rafter soffit applications, first install receiving channels, F channel or J channel, along the wall and along the fascia board when needed, leaving a 1/4 inch at each end for expansion. Loosely center nail in place. Next, measure from the wall to the fascia board. If the eave span exceeds 16 inches, you must install nailing strips before proceeding. If you're using beaded panels, they must be nailed every 10 inches. If you're using Iron Max double 5-inch soffit, it may be nailed every 24 inches. Cut soffit panels, subtracting a 1/2 inch for expansion. Again, cut using a circular saw with a reversed fine-tooth blade. Insert panels into the channel on the wall and then into the channel at the fascia board. You may have to flex the panel slightly. Make sure the panel is straight, then nail it. If you're using nailing strips, do not nail the soffit tightly. Allow movement for expansion. If you're nailing to the fascia board, use small-headed nails. Drive nails through the V-groove if possible. This is the only time face nailing of a soffit panel is acceptable. Continue installation by locking and nailing each panel. To turn a corner, measure, cut, and miter an H-divider bar minus a 1/4 inch. Install a nailing strip for extra support if necessary. Now, miter a soffit panel and install as before. To finish off the job, you may need to apply utility trim at the ends. To function properly, houses need adequate attic ventilation. Minimum ventilation requirements vary from locale to locale. To be sure you're providing the proper amount of ventilation, check with your local building inspector or obtain the most recent copy of the FHA Attic Ventilation Recommendations. Attic ventilation is a system requiring air intake via vented soffit panels and air exhaust through a ridge vent or other roof vents. Intake and exhaust areas must be equal to create a balanced system. The free airspace of our soffit panels may be found in our specification sheets. One of the best ways to ensure adequate free airspace is to use Invisivent superventilated soffit. Its vents are hidden in the dovetails between the faces. Invisivent provides 10+ inches of net free area per square foot. It's the highest intake ventilation available in vinyl soffit for optimum attic airflow performance. And it looks great installed. To install soffit at hip roof corners, we'll assume you've already installed receiving channels where needed. To determine the length of H-divider bar required, measure the distance between the wall and the fascia board. Subtract a 1/4 inch for expansion. Cut the H-divider bar to this length. Miter the end at a 45-degree angle. If necessary, install nailing strips to provide backing for the H-divider bars and soffit. Nail the H-divider bar in place. Finally, cut a 45-degree miter at one end of the soffit panels. Install the soffit using standard installation procedures. And here's a little trick. If you end up needing a very small piece of soffit to finish your run, you can use a partially driven nail to hold down the face of the panel. It's much easier to install soffit at a box return than it is at a hip roof corner. For starters, the rough framing for the box should have already been in place, even in new construction. So all you have to do is install receiving channel along the wall, fascia board, and the return before installing soffit panels. There are two procedures for installations at wide overhangs. We'll start with new construction and remodeling projects where an existing surface has to be removed. If you're installing a porch ceiling or a wide overhang where soffit panels will run parallel to overhead joists, you have to provide additional nailing strips to support the soffit. Install the nailing strips perpendicular to the overhead joists, placing a strip a maximum of every 10 inches for beaded panels, 16 inches for normal soffit, and 24 inches for Iron Max soffit. Insert the soffit panels into receiving channels along the wall perimeters and nail at each nailing strip. The procedure is much easier for remodeling projects where there's a solid nailable surface. Install receiving channels along the wall perimeter and nail panels in place. You don't need to be an expert to determine what happened along this fascia installation. The telltale signs of improper installation are obvious the entire length. In this section, we'll look at fascia application. To install vinyl fascia with soffit, first nail undersill trim in place along the top of the fascia board. Then nail F-channel along the bottom of the fascia board. To determine the width of fascia panel, measure from the slot of the undersill trim to the bottom of the F-channel. Add ½ inch and cut. Use a snap lock punch to create tabs 1/8 inch below the cut edge. Punch tabs every 6 inches with the tab raised on the outside face of the panel. To install, hook the bottom of the fascia panel under the F-channel and push the top into the undersill trim. When overlapping fascia panels, first cut a notch in the underlying panel. The notch should be 1/8 of an inch deep by 1½ inches long. Then slip the notched panel into the adjacent panel. At corners, first fabricate a corner piece. Cut a length of fascia panel so it extends 6 inches beyond the corner. Mark a vertical line to indicate the position of the corner. Then cut a 90-degree V-notch centered on the vertical line. Score along the vertical line. Fold and create tabs along the upper edge with a snap lock punch. Finally, fit the panel on the corner, making sure to underlap the preceding panel.